I think being intentional is probably the biggest thing. So once I have all that, I'm a big time boxer, and communicating with people at work. So because I think sometimes, you have to be intentional with getting everything done.
Fear of falling and fear of loud noises. So all the other things we pull on ourselves and we learn and we discover. And actually babies and kids don't have that. We learn those.
Some training is better than no training, right? And it doesn't matter what that form takes. At least I can walk at the moment, right? That's been a massive blessing that I'm actually able to walk and do stuff, right? If I was completely laid out, that would be another thing altogether. So I think for me, reframing is a real big skill.
Hey, welcome back to the Mindful Pass podcast. Something a little bit different today. Harry, good to see you. And Sean, good to see you. This is our 87th episode and the first time we've ever had a guest on the show. So we're on new ground. So listen, I'll let you do an introduction. Sean, everyone knows me, everyone knows Harry. I'll ask how you are in a moment, Harry. But Sean, who are you, sir? Why are you here? I believe that we antagonized you with an episode we released about 30 episodes ago, and it's led us to where we are today. So I'll let you tell the story.
That's a true story, and actually honored. So to have an American on as your first guest, also a little concerning for you guys. So I've been a triathlete for 30 some odd years, and then have a corporate gig. Which is where I met you originally, Nick, and then we clicked here. And so really want to talk about the mindful piece. So I also work for a company called on the side, Meta Performance Coaching, which is really about being well and staying happy while you try to achieve your goals at corporate and your athletic goals, all while, having a smile on your face. And the episode you guys are talking about before, is it 30 episodes ago? So I guess that makes me a long-time listener. Was as someone in their mid-50s, you guys were on an episode and you wanted to talk about aging athletes and what happens as you get older. And you guys put them in the bucket of 35. And I don't think I was even all the way through the episode when I was sending you an email.
Yeah. So for full context, you're older than a 35, Sean. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know, mate. So...
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, no. In the morning, I know.
Also, this is me sucking up after offending you. So I also want to say...
I'm closer to the 55 than the 35 anyway. So I'm not sure. I think it's because Nick's a little bit younger than me. And so maybe we had it at 35 of that episode. But I'm closer to the 55, unfortunately, for my sake, I think. Probably.
Well, we like talking about biohacking on this show, right? So we always say, it's hopefully we're going to stay the age as we are now with modern science and all the things we're doing, right? I want to say as well, on the last episode, for those that checked in, having listened to it back, I need to make a little bit of an apology to Harry. I think I got a little bit agitated. I'm going to blame it on the jet lag. We had quite a heated discussion around something that Brené Brown said. It doesn't necessarily change my view. I don't want to go back over it, by the way. However, the way I articulated my position was probably more tired and jet lagged than I would usually mean it to be. It hasn't actually been released yet. It'll be released by the time this comes out, but I'm interested to see how that comes out. But there's a little early apology before we start.
It's interesting to have these, I like to call them spirited debates anyway, because I think the whole thing that brought us together, Sean, 3 years ago now for this start of this podcast now, Nick, was that we do have different views on certain things. We're both passionate on many similar subjects, but we have alternate views. And I think that's important because I think in this day and age, these opposing views aren't heard as much. And I don't think we oppose too much. I think it's just we understood things slightly differently. And having a spirited debate is... invigorates me. So I actually enjoyed that because I think for too long we've been agreeing on far too much, Nick. So there we go.
Well, I think I went back to my old self of just being a little bit, I don't know, more aggressive than I'd like to be and less articulate than I'd like to be on the show. But I was saying to Sean, and welcome, Sean, this is the way we set this show up. It was never to be anything too scripted, right? People, those that regularly listen will know that. Me and Harry meet up, we chat about a subject, and we try and have a conversation as if we're in the pub or a restaurant or whatever, talking and debating subjects and seeing where it leads. So you're someone who has a lot of things in common with the things that I love, which is Ironman, and obviously slightly different in terms of football supporting, as I support a club that's got a proper history and you support Arsenal. But I think that aside, like in terms of Ironman racing, you've competed at a really good level. You've seen age, I don't know if age is the right word, but certain health ailments get the better of you. And I wanted to share that on the show. I've obviously, for full transparency, been on your podcast, the Meta Performance podcast. And we talked about some of my things that people already know on this show, things that I've been through and my performance. But there's something that I've never experienced, Crohn's disease being one. I haven't hit the ripe age of 50 yet. I know that you've went through a whole period of training really hard and actually having a complete break altogether. So tell us a little bit about your background. Just let listeners know about your background in sport, background in wellness, and yeah, just some of the trials and tribulations.
Yeah. So, first of all, on the football thing, I believe we're past St. Tottenham's Day. So, you know, we know for a matter of fact where you're going to end up in the table. So we'll just leave that out there. So yeah, you know, I was a college basketball player, had a knee injury. Rehab was actually to swim and to bike. And I hadn't been much of that prior, and got into triathlon. And it's really been, you know, I want to say now 36th year coming, 38th year coming this year, where I've done at least one triathlon. That's kind of gone from doing a lot at a high level to sometimes not, you know, doing less. A lot of it based on wellness. So, you know, kind of the mindfulness as you guys talk about, like where I am with life. My kids are all off the payroll mostly, but definitely in their, you know, in their mid 20s. And so out of the house. And so you can imagine the cycle of being in sport, racing, you know, professionally, kind of going and then having kids. And then, you know, they get out and you kind of come back. And then now we're about 5 years ago, almost 4.5 years ago, I had Crohn's. So late onset Crohn's, which is a bonus because I got 50 good years without it. And then it took me a while to kind of get used to dealing with all the issues that come with having a chronic illness over the period of time. And then, yeah, I've probably coached for 20 years. So it was interesting having, you know, coached people and, you know, the no excuses kind of thing going on and working with athletes. And then going through some of those trials myself over a period of time while you're coaching athletes, that also changes your perspective.
Knowing what you know now, is there anything you would shift? I mean, things I don't know much about Crohn's, so by all means enlighten me, and apologies. I'm not an expert on this at all. Harry probably has more information than I do. But, you know, we talk a lot about how we can sometimes prevent illness or prevent certain things if we optimize our lives in advance. The idea of prevention is better than cure. So knowing what you know now in terms of how you were living your life, how you were eating, how you were fueling, do you think that played into it? Or do you think it was an inevitability that this would have hit you anyway? Or have you changed anything as a result?
I've changed a lot. So I don't know that I don't generally look back so much. It's kind of like you can't work the problem in reverse. And jokingly, I think if I invented a time machine, I probably wouldn't go back and fix that. I'd probably be in the stock market. So I don't try to spend a bunch of time back like that. It definitely has changed a lot of diet. So Crohn's, for people who don't know, it's a GI issue. And at some level, the easiest way to explain it is your stomach gets extremely irritated easier, and you know, could swell up, for lack of a term, get inflamed and close down. You also have issues. So it limits what you can eat. And then there are issues taking in calories. So you can imagine as an endurance athlete, the ability to process fuel is an issue. And for anyone who's done sport, you know that the harder you push, the harder it is to eat and drink anyway. So then you just kind of have to double down on that. And so knowing your numbers becomes a bigger deal. So you end up with kind of like, too technical, kind of like an L1, L2, you know, thing, LT1, LT2, you know, threshold. You end up with somewhere in the middle, like LT1 and a half, because you have this kind of Crohn's bar in the middle for us. And then the day in and day out is a thing. And so that changed a lot of my diet, because a lot of the things that are in the what's good for you, you know, model aren't good for you if you have Crohn's. So if you think about the great diet of, you know, no nuts, so no nuts for me, very little vegetables, no red meat, which is probably fine, no brown rice, no quinoa, no salad, no, like all the stuff that you normally want to lean into. I basically eat like a teenage boy. So, you know, chicken, fries, you know, and then try to get my nutrients where I can, for the places I'm allowed, to keep me, you know, healthy while training.
So is it those kind of like the nuts, the vegetables that will then? So it's an inflammatory response of the intestine, yes, basically.
Yeah.
And so I guess you're trying to stick to an anti-inflammatory diet, I guess, would that be? But then you know, fried
Yeah.
would be inflammatory, I would have thought, but you know, is
So
it?
every Crohn's is different. So like for me, the lucky jokingly when I mean I eat like a teenage boy, the one kind of thing I've been able to tolerate in moderation, like anything, has been fried food.
Yeah,
So jokingly when I go out and eat, I eat like a chicken and fries,
yeah,
type of thing. Luckily, when I go to the UK, that means fish and chips is on the table.
mm,
Uh, you know, no peas, but you're right. Anything that basically is harder to digest. So a lot of a lot of vegetables that are hard to digest. Some I can have cooked. The only raw ones I can have are like cucumbers and bell peppers, like
mm,
the two raw things, and then a lot of white. Anything that's a FODMAP diet,
yeah,
really easy to digest, which again is kind of different than what you normally have. Things like recovery, so I can't have whey protein. I've got to have plant based protein because the whey is dairy. Dairy is very like dairy and I are definitely not friends anymore.
yeah.
That is not good.
Yeah, how are you with like smoothied vegetables? I mean, as Nick knows, and all our listeners know, I'm big on smoothies. For the last 15 years,
Big on smoothies.
and I green smoothies, and I put everything in. Obviously, there's the nuts and seeds in there that you wouldn't necessarily want, but obviously, there's lots of vegetables in there which also you might not want. But how is it if you have everything like pureed? Because I'm just thinking about if you're training a lot, it's not easy to eat fish and chips on a bike ride, right? So how does that all work? Have you experimented with different sort of smoothie concoctions?
Yeah, so smoothies probably pre and post some. So obviously, from a protein standpoint, I'm not a huge smoothie fan myself, although kind of banana, peanut butter, the usual, and there's some other smoothies. I have dialed in my race nutrition, right? I think that took me a while, and so I use a product called Tailwind, which is kind of all natural, and then next maple syrup. Some of the waffles work better for me, kind of what works for you type of thing. But then for me, I have to be really careful where I am with my numbers, because the higher you crank down the speed, the less fuel I can take through. So even though I might be trying to consume 100 grams of carbs an hour, if I got my foot on the gas for a long period of time, I'm probably only getting 50 through the system. And that becomes a problem, as Nick knows later. You pay for your sins
Later in the
later in the
race.
race.
Yeah, we can be graphic
Mm.
on this show, Sean. So like Harry, I think, has talked about his movements more than one time on this show.
Yeah, no, my kids, the first half I tried too early, not having it done. I had a great 2 loops of the run, and I jokingly in the second loop of the run, I didn't get it right. It was my first. Actually, was surprised I made it that far. But there were 5 aid stations in the 6 miles, right, for a half Ironman, and I went to 6 porta potties, because I found one at a construction site. So I was N+1. The best part of that story, of course, is some poor guy was on his first loop, and I literally passed him 5 times. So I
Yeah,
would go to the
okay.
bathroom. He was great because he was like, you only have to go around twice, right? Like, you only have to go around the course twice.
That's
But just
what.
getting, and it's been worse than that. Like, but I think now I've got it pretty dialed in, and you really want to stay in your lane at that point.
I mean, just I haven't done a triathlon now for 19 years. The last one I did the London Triathlon, and these are just Olympic level, Olympic
Oh,
distance events, right? So they're not any of these Ironman things. So for me, with an Olympic level triathlon, you don't need to fuel as you're going. But you're more someone that's doing those bigger distances, those half Ironmans, full Ironmans, and so you're having to eat on the bike, eat eat whilst running, or whatever it might be.
yeah. Yeah, but I will say, like, we've talked about the physical piece of it, which is true. There's a big mental aspect. So I went through it when we had kids, where it kind of got slower, right? It was either take care of the kids or get slower. So, I had to mentally deal with, not standing on the podium or not doing whatever. I loved the longer distances as we went going. There was one period of time when you talk about keeping yourself happy. I got too tied. I think I talked to you a little bit about this, Nick. I got
Yeah,
too tied to Hawaii and going out there, and I completely failed on a race, and realized actually the 3 or 4 months before that, I'd lost, the happiness of the journey. It's really about the journey.
Mm,
Jokingly, when you don't qualify for Kona, like if the journey was great, you're like, that's a bummer. There's always next year. And I just saved $10,000, right? Fine. And you move on because the journey was great. And I lost that happiness, and then took a year or two where I did 1 or 2 triathlons, but did some ultra running because I could kind of shift the thing to be like, hey, if I don't die, finish, like it's a W. And then I found the love for being outside again. And then I just kind of naturally gravitated back towards triathlon because that's kind of my happy place.
Yeah.
Post Crohn's, I did, a couple Ironman. The half is about where I'm bounding this year. And I actually turned to your point, Harry, about where you can be successful and happy is this year. I'll do nationals again here and world championships for the Olympic distance. And so I kind of started to say, like, where can I actually be super successful and happy? Because when I did Ironman with Crohn's, I'll do another one, I'm sure, but I'm more finishing at that point and figuring out where I'm going to finish. I'm not chasing, the pointy end of that stick. And I still kind of want to do that. So every year you sit, I've sat down with this now that I've got it figured out and said, here's the bounds of me as a human and where I can be successful and what do I want to achieve this year. And I don't think, at least at this point yet, I'm still trying to dial some things in. I can be successful, and be podium chasing in Ironman. Those two things just aren't on the table for me right now.
Sean, so I just going to jump in because I've been in a similar spot. And I'm younger. I went used to obstacle course race, did it at a pretty good level. I was at world champs and things like that. I've did Ironman. I've qualified for the world champs as you have. But there is an element of when you put that much training into long distance events, and we're talking hours and hours and hours here, right? You got to get permission from your family. Your friends kind of all know you do it. A lot of your friends don't do it because it's just too much for them, whatever. But it's quite easy for it to become part of your core identity. You get known as Sean the Ironman, Sean the athlete. Harry will often comment about how much stuff I've done in the past or whatever, and it becomes part of your identity. So it can be quite hard to shift it when it has to change. And that can be for me, I found that quite mentally challenging. I still probably do. I still, sometimes if I'm not at my peak level of fitness, I'll find ways to justify it. And I'll feel like I have to say it before my wife says anything, just because I feel like that's what she's thinking. Of course she's not, but I've been so used to being fit for such a long period of time. How long have we known each other, Harry? It's been, almost 15 years of competing at a high level. And right now I'm not, I've got other priorities. And it is a little bit of a mental game on that side. How are you finding that, or how have you found that?
I think the helpful thing for me was that break. Gosh, I don't remember how many years it is now. Now I'll feel old, 15, 20 years ago, when I'd had that kind of breakdown in happiness and took the time and went back and, you started to look at myself and say, why are you outside? So first of all, I'm like a child. I just want to play outside. Not swim, bike, run, hike, kayak, climb, doesn't matter. And once I got back to that, so I think when this came back, this way, I had that as a lever to be like, hey, remember, you can be unhappy. And I joke with people all the time. I can also go to work and be unhappy. Like, there's no shortage of places to go be unhappy. That's not far to go. And I think with Crohn's, the other thing too is, like, I'm still able to get out and be relatively competitive where I'm at. And there are people with Crohn's that, really can't get out and do the things. And if you go way back, I'll send you the link, but I try to race as number 179 when I race a lot. So if you go back and look up, 179 John Blaze, he had ALS. It's a guy I knew, was on the, Kona TV show, the Kona show one year as one of the athletes, and then passed away, and he rolls across the finish line. And so I roll across the finish line a lot. But I think, what he left me with is, it's a huge gift to be able to get out and suffer at any level. And so, there's a lot of people whenever, Nick, you're going to spend time in the hurt locker. I tell people it's usually not physical recovery that keeps you from going to the next event. It's like, am I mentally ready to go commit like that for a period of time?
Yeah.
In the hurt locker.
I mean,
that's one thing that always comes to my mind is, like, I am really, really blessed to be able to be out here and suffering. And I think, again, after Crohn's, there was a period, the first time I was in the hospital in a long time, was like, am I going to be able to get back out and do this? And then I got out there, and then you're like, how bad can I make it hurt? Which, sounds awful if you put it that way, but you just kind of get to the point where you're like, okay. Yeah.
I think the first person...
Simon Ong. Go on, Harry, you go.
Say that, I mean, you were talking about getting out and doing that with the Crohn's, and a lot of people, they can't. The first person I remember that I think I knew at some level who had Crohn's was when I used to work at the London Stock Exchange here in London, obviously, and I was working in an operational centre, so 24/7 cover. But one of the guys that was working in the ops team with us, he would only work nights, actually, and I'm sure he had Crohn's. I think it was Crohn's that he had. For some reason, night shifts felt better for him. But both he and another colleague that I think later I met who had Crohn's, they weren't doing much. And Nick was talking about, identifying with your, I guess, athleticism, but a lot of people, when they have a condition of some sort, identify with the condition.
Absolutely right.
It seems that you're not identifying with that, but you have a stronger identity, which is that of, I'm an athlete, therefore it doesn't matter what else is going on for me. That is my modus operandi, as it were, as opposed to some people who have it maybe earlier in life, or they haven't got another hook that they're into. Then they go, I'm a Crohn's sufferer, and therefore.
I think I knew Sean for probably 2 years until I even knew you'd had it, right? And you only came out because of this show. Like, it's not, I would say it's something that it's, you've never let it define you in what my knowledge of you. A lot of, as I was saying, a lot of people will almost open with the thing that they are, they're struggling with, as if it's some kind of, I don't know, they're worried about the judgment or whatever. So they'll bring it up. And as Hari says, it allows them to define them. And I don't think in my knowledge of knowing you over the years, that hasn't been the case for you. But I thought it was quite interesting because Simon Ong in his book, Energize, left a quote, said, it's impossible to be unhappy and grateful at the same time. Like they're in opposition. And I think, it sounds to me like you've got a lot of gratitude for being able to be out there, to be able to compete. And the second thing that me and Hari talk a lot about on this show, and you'll know as a listener, is a lot of it is the journey, right? Like, if you're born into wealth and you've never had to work for anything in your life, those people are often the most traumatized, unhappiest people on the planet. It's about going through the journey, going through something. You need the yin and the yang, as Hari would put it. You need to go through the struggle sometimes to really then appreciate what's on the other side. We talk about the Everest idea, where you either climb up it, and it takes weeks and weeks of acclimatization, struggle, potential death, whatever, and you meet someone else who's been flown to the top. You don't look at the same view, although you're seeing the same thing, right? It just feels entirely different. And you've been on quite a journey.
Yeah, and I think it's, if it's Everest, how much time you spent getting into each base camp, are you enjoying the trek, so if you do go out and climb in the Himalayas, Everest or Lhotse or whatever your boat is, you end up spending a long time, or do you stay too focused on, that pinnacle moment? Puts a lot of pressure on that pinnacle moment.
Yeah.
But it's really the journey you think about it, even in an Ironman, right? 10 to 17 hours, 9 to 17 hours, whatever you're out there, if that's your whole happy point, but the amount of hours you put in to do that is insane. To be, I actually would argue it goes the other way. When you go to like Olympic distance racing, you can race a little more frequently, but now you're talking about 2 hours. And you're really not training that much less, one long ride a week, probably different, like, because you're putting more time in the pool because it matters more. You're running, you still got to get your miles, got to do the, maybe harder track workouts. And now you're down to 2 hours and everything's over minutes, like truly over minutes.
How long do you train a week currently versus, say, at your most
competitive ever, or as the season goes now?
Like, let's say your peak was at 30 years old or whatever.
Yeah,
what were you doing then? What are you doing now in terms of hours per week?
So if I go back to when I was doing more Olympic distance, so compare apples to apples, I'm probably not dissimilar. So I know durability is the new tool, the new toy, word that people are using. I've used durability on how long you can stay in the sport and how physically adept you are. Now you've got durability of muscles and when you move from, start to break down in performance. But I've been able to stay pretty consistent over the years because I'll move up and down. But I would say, I'm probably 12 hours a week now, and I'll get to 15 or 16 in the peak season. And then, you have the downsized, down cycling. The thing that's probably changed over. Oh, go ahead.
Now, I've got a question only because and I still want to hear where it's changed. But Hari, I've been on the receiving end of these questions a lot over the 87 episodes we've done now. And it's good to get a second point of view. So as someone who's put in a lot of hours for Ironman training, 12 hours a week now, you've got a family, you have your own podcast. In fact, you've had several podcasts. You work as an executive, you travel all over the world. And often I'm the one on the receiving end of the conversation with Hari going, how do we balance all this stuff? And I often actually just almost dismiss it as part of my ADHD or undiagnosed ADHD brain. It's the way I am and I need to be busy and whatever. But there is a balancing act to be had. And it'd be interesting to understand how you balance it, whether you and I have got some synergy here, whether we do it very differently. Because I know I need to get the permission of my family. Sometimes I overstep and have to kind of draw it back. Sometimes I overstep myself and end up more burnt out than I realized. And I think my last episode with Hari was probably an example of that. I was exhausted. I'd do the thing anyway. don't give the best version of myself, crash, struggle with insomnia. So how do you manage all those things? I'd be interested to know if you do things differently, optimize nutrition, recovery. You just mentioned, I'm going around here, but I've got to give it all to you on a plate. You just mentioned the durability piece. So Harry will say to me, I don't stretch enough. I've got to find time to foam roll, massage, stretch, nutrition. Something has to give. And I tend to give on the things that probably will serve me best, which is I don't do enough foam rolling. I don't do enough stretching. I don't do that kind of work. I do a little bit, but not enough. So also from your side, whilst balancing all of that, where are the sacrifices? What are the things you don't do enough of?
Yeah, I've quoted you a lot on this because I used to take me about 5 minutes to explain it. But when you say yes to something, you say no to something.
Yeah.
That is a bit that's how I've used to explain that a lot. I will say it starts at home. So I used to say basically I had to bring my annual plan to management here at the house because you are not doing certain things. And then I think to make it all, you have to be very intentional. What's most important that year, and so depending where the kids were in school, was it their activities, their stuff? Was I coaching? Was I doing whatever? Because that means I might be training 7 hours a week or 10 hours a week instead of 12. And, at those extra hours matter, and where you on setting your goals. If finishing is your goal, that's different than like finishing near the podium or finishing on the podium. Those are all different goals. And to your point, you can't always. I physically am not that athlete to be able to train less and still perform the same. That's not how this machine works. Like I need to put in the time. I think being intentional is probably the biggest thing. So once I have all that, I'm a big time boxer and communicating with people at work. So when is this showing? Not for at least for a week or two. So tomorrow is going to be one of the few days. It's been around 0 C or colder for a long time. Tomorrow is going to be like 15 or 17. And so I have a meeting in the afternoon out on the bike. But I know good and well that I box that time, but I know then I box time later in the day to do that work because I think sometimes, you have to be intentional with getting everything done that's there. My calendar is kind of weird to your point about rolling. Like I will put in a 10-minute meeting to roll. I'll put in during when I'm time boxing to get a PowerPoint done that it's also 10 minutes of, using the rollers, my big thing, the stick on my everyone's got their thing, the calves. I just schedule it as a reminder at the beginning because there's a point in time I sit down at the beginning of the week and write down, what are the big things I want to get done. Here's all my other tasks. And then I calendar usually for the month and I calendar that.
What do you sacrifice? And do you do any of Harry's tips? So Harry will literally like run a ball under his feet while he's brushing his teeth. He'll do a workout while he's in the shower. There's a video of this out there. Harry, I'm sure, will build you more information on this in a moment. But is there anything you sacrifice? Is something you think in the back of your mind, you feel like you're optimizing, but there's that one thing you go, you probably could do that a little bit more, but you know what? Something's got to give.
I have not stretched and rolled when the kids, that was the one. I'm with you. Like I have actually told people when we've had conversations from a coaching standpoint, how important stretching. And I'm always like, it is. And they're like, do you do enough of it? I cannot believe I haven't missed a year. I am not super flexible. I do core work. Like meeting gets over 2 minutes early, 3 minutes early. I'll core. I think that's easy. Core crunches, whatever. Again, being super intentional. I have an amount of core and crunch stuff I want to do every day. I think that leads to longevity. Anyone who's had a back issue knows like once your back is off, the rest of you just doesn't matter.
Actually, just to jump in on that, you probably can't tell from now, but my back for the first time in years went out on Thursday.
Really?
Yeah. So I was doing what I've been doing every day for the last 15 years. So Sean, pretty much most mornings, one of my coffee, if you like, is to jump on a rebounder or a mini trampoline. Well, I do that for 15, 20 minutes almost every day for the last 15 years. And I have a number of them in the different places I tend to stay. And I just felt something. It was weird and it didn't feel too significant. And then I got off the trampoline and it started to get progressively worse. And honestly, I'm sat in the chair right now, but I can't get anything up off the floor when I'm putting socks on, underwear on. It was a 9 out of 10 for a few days. Now it's gone down to a 7. I went to an osteopath about about 3 hours before coming here. I was on an osteopath's table. And then an hour before here, I was lying on my sister's, I don't know if you use these things, PEMF mat, so pulsed electromagnetic frequency mat. So it's like a recovery device. And yeah, it's been such a challenge because I'm physical, but I'm not someone who does what you and Nick do, which is have this desire anymore to do all these competitions. For about 20 years, I haven't done that. Like, I think in 2007 may have been my last triathlon. And as I was getting into that, I think I started to feel patella tendonitis in my knee. I got into a bit more yoga, and then I was questioning myself with it, because as I was doing more and more triathlons, I was training less and less, and I was generally getting better. And so I thought, it's not the challenge. It's not doing it. It's not getting me out to train to do this. And so for me, I train just to live and be able to do things like, pick up my knees. And now I'm at that point where I can't even pick up, my underwear off the floor at the moment. It's the worst thing, being in like severe back pain. I've had it a few times in my life. So I feel that. My question with this as well is, because I say to Nick all the time, I'm training for life. What would, and Nick needs a goal, from what I understand, to do things. He needs something.
I do, yeah.
Now he's on his paddle journey. I'm not sure what the goal is with that exactly. Maybe there's a competition coming up or whatever. But what about you? If we took away all of that training for an event, would you still train? Would you,
Yeah.
how would life be different?
I think from training, I'd still go out. I think the couple years that I've had less, I've probably trained as much or more. So I do have this thing, and whether it's a goal or not, so it is always in the back of my mind. Since I was 26, I've run my age in miles right around my birthday. I used to be adamant about doing it on my birthday, but then as I got older and wiser, I'm like, it's going to be nice in one day or a day before, like, and it's going to be miserable that day. Somebody's going to go out when it's nice.
So just to be clear, you run your age in miles. So let's say when you get to 70, you're going to run 70 miles.
I think the goal right now is to make it to 62, and then I'll move to K's.
Well, that's cool.
I think you come to the UK and do the Jurassic 100 when you hit 100. That's a good way. Get a letter from the Queen while you're here. Do the Jurassic 100 when you're 100 years old.
And one of my favorite hundreds ever was up in the Lakes region. Actually, it was a great. It was a great. It's beautiful up there. For me, the goal, so I have that always sitting out there, I guess, or I will create kind of faux goals for myself. The biggest difference is probably the high intensity stuff. And so when I have a goal, like this year for me, like my A race will be Worlds in September. That requires going faster, which means I'm doing track workouts every week and everything else. Left to my own devices, I'll just go tool around. And I think that's the biggest difference. And I think that's a huge advantage for older athletes, because we need the high intensity work. You need the muscular work. You need that stuff that a lot of us will tend to just go out and cruise, left to our own devices. Which probably is also bad for me when you think about if you're just cruising, because then I don't go as slow as I need to go slow too. So, you train really fast and really slow. Again, if I don't have a plan that I'm working to and I'm just left out, I'll just go run at the same pace all the time because that's comfortable. Might slowly get, as more miles ramp up, get a little faster, and then it'll go a little slower in the winter. But I need that kind of plan in place to really go slower. And I won't lie, the go slower took me a while to get my head around. But I really enjoy those long runs, really, but it feels almost ridiculously slow.
And do you do anything like weights, resistance to support your training? Because there's a lot of hours on the bike, on the feet, maybe in the pool or whatever, lake.
And I never did, Sean. I never did the weight stuff. I just did the cardio.
I never. That's the give. So that's always been on my every year. Can I fit that? So you get to the beginning of the year, and here's my goal. Here's my corporate goals. Like, how do those line up? Timing's a really big thing too. What quarters are you on? When is stuff going to happen? Because I think that's the stress that's semi-controllable, or at least get way out in front of it. And then it is, how much extra stuff do I want to do? Well, this is the year I'm going to do weight training, and then it drops. I've always just done big gear training. I've lived in hills, so like our last kilometer here is 110 meters up, to the house. So between running hills, riding hills, paddles in the pool, that's kind of how I intermix it. But I definitely don't do I don't touch the weights. When the kids were home, I'd move their weights for them. That was about the extent of calling it weights.
Yeah, I think with weights, a lot of people do feel like I don't do as much as I could, but I, for the last maybe 7 years, have had this reasonably consistent once a week pattern. I think I've explained it to Nick, where you're effectively doing 5 or 6 exercises once a week. It takes about 15 minutes super slow. So 5 seconds one way, 5 seconds the other way, without ever going to full extension or contraction. So you're constantly under load, and it's effectively a chest press, a row, a shoulder press, a lat pull down, a leg press, and then a hinge, kind of almost like a deadlift, but super slow. So 6 exercises, takes me maybe 15 to 20 minutes, depending on if other people are in the gym at the same time. And I do that usually before I teach yoga on a Friday. And that's been my sort of consistent pattern. And I kind of recommend that sort of routine to a lot of people who are doing things where weights isn't their thing, right? But they need to stay strong. And especially the more I listen to more and more longevity podcasts, all of this, it's the number one thing is muscle mass and having resistance training as you age. And I'm going to be 50 next year, which is scary to say. So 49 in September. I'll be 49 in September. And so today, I'm thinking, and I literally mean today, I'm thinking more about aging. As I've had my 2-year-old niece playing with me earlier, and she's seen me struggle to get up because I can't do my core and get up. I have to roll onto my side and then push down and then push on objects. And it just reminded me of my grandmother and my dad towards the end of them trying to get up from things. So for me, strength training would be a big one to include, even if it's like 15 minutes a week. You can get a lot of gains.
Bro, we got to talk though about this. We're almost 50 when you're not even 49 yet.
Yeah, I like that.
Like,
Pick up on that.
you're not even close to the club. You're like there. I do think like high intensity workouts, which is building muscle mass, right? It's building this, any way that you get that, I think has been pretty consistent messaging from people about how, the anti-aging thing. And I think just dumb luck that for me to compete, it's forced me to do that stuff. And so like, I do it. I think other parts of it is like, I'm generally the oldest cat that I'm training with. When I'm riding and running. And so I think just staying mentally young. And my wife would say I'm 56 going on 19 and only 19 because it makes me legal. So I think that's, that's also important too. Still be a kid and play outside.
I think that's really important. It's one of the things I talk about in my longevity, I guess, or health and well-being protocol is this idea of having fun and also living with what I call the E3 baby mindset, which is, so when I look at babies and young people, they explore, they enjoy, and they evolve. And so it's like living with that kind of mindset, I think is really young.
You're only born with 2 fears, right? Fear of falling and fear of loud noises. So all the other things we pull on ourselves and we learn and we discover and we think, oh, I've got to be fearful of this or fearful of entering a race or fearful of, and actually babies and kids don't have that. We learn those behaviors later. I'm just interested to know, Sean, from your side, obviously a lot of our listeners are people interested in, well, we assume they're interested in wellness or mindfulness and things like that. So all the lessons you've learned, what are the lessons that you would want to share with someone if someone was listening to this, they were looking to optimize their life in whatever way, they've had their 56th birthday, they're feeling like they're a 19-year-old, but they're looking at someone like you and going, how's Sean managed to keep going and competing for so long and balance his family, balance his work very successfully? What would be your piece of advice?
Yeah, similar to what you said. I think, figure out what you want to do and you do you and make your own path. I've told people all the time, and you probably get it too. Part of the curse of, if you've gone long and you've done stuff is people are like, well, I can't do that. Or what are people going to say when they talk to you? And I usually tell them, first of all, just screw them. Like let them talk. No one who's competitive or has done this stuff that I know of will ever give you any grief. No. Like that's where the support's going to come from. The way you can find out if someone's actually a pretty serious athlete generally is like, if they give you grief, they're just not. Like we've all been on, and especially if they've done it over time, we've all had years where you're not, you're almost coming back from nothing. And then you're a system of one. So I think, you go back and you set your goals and, so for me, I do, I don't talk about the Crohn stuff because I just kind of go on, I'm a system of one and nobody cares. But at the same token, like for me, it's how do you, what are my goals for the year? Like, is that a reasonable goal with my family, my work, my situation, my everything? And that's the goal I'm chasing. And if someone else is like, well, if you move this around, you could do better, you could do that. I'm like, I got all this stuff. Like, this is my plan. And you just got to deal with that. Again, you can be
Yeah.
miserable in a number of ways, but you really just shouldn't be making yourself miserable. And then just be grateful. Like if you're going couch to 5K, like, dude, you're off the couch. Like, that's awesome. Like, be grateful you're off the couch and you have the ability to start the journey.
I
That's
love
the
that
best time.
system.
I think people doing
Yeah.
their first race, people going couch to 5K. First of all, we love to help people like that because a lot of us, like, I'm never getting faster again. Like, I'll never see a personal best again. I'll never see anything else. Like, we're fighting for seconds. Watching people go through that journey and how super stoked they are they get to set a new personal best every couple of weeks and how excited they are. That's also a reminder for those of us that have been around for a while, like how fun this can be and how exciting it is.
Yeah. I
So
think a
I
couple of
think just
things.
yeah.
The system of one I love. I'm going to mention the couch to 5K thing because people always look at any three of us, right? We've optimized our lives in different ways in terms of health and fitness. But you look at Harry right now; he's done his back in. If you're competing at a high level, we have serious injuries at different times where you're just incapacitated, you can't, and you have to start again. Like you always have respect for anyone that's willing to get off the sofa and do it because at some point, whether you're a top athlete or not, there's a moment in all of our lives where we have to start again and our fitness is gone and it takes that motivation to go, I've lost it all. I've got to try and work now to get it back. But the system of one I love, actually, I discovered this of all books. I read a golf book, literally, and it changed my life a few years ago now. And I think it's generally been part of my own mindfulness journey. The golf book literally said in there, when you're playing golf, nobody cares about your score but you. And when you're on the golf course, everyone else plays this, but you'll hit a miss shot, and the first thing you'll do is tell everyone why you hit it wrong. I'd usually putt that. It's because of this. And you realize that no one else cares. They're in their own heads about their own game, right? And as soon as you learn that lesson, the game just gets infinitely more enjoyable. And I read this and it hit me and I was going, oh my God, I was seeing a reflection of me going, I do this. I'm always giving excuses on the golf course. I'm always moaning. Oh my God, I must be a nightmare on the golf course as the first insight for me. And it changed. And I've got the same buddies I go and play golf with now regularly. And I know they don't care, right? They're in their own heads about their own handicaps. The last thing they care about is mine. And I think that system for one thing is a real game changer. I think even for me, I think on the flip side, it probably makes you ever so slightly less competitive. If the reason you're doing it is for external validation or external competition. But if you're doing it for yourself, it makes you more competitive. It's just you have to get the balance right. So it kind of changed my priorities a little bit. And I remember doing races and I'd give full overviews at the end of why I didn't get a certain time. And going full circle, you were talking about the toilet thing earlier. And a lot of people go, I would have gone under this time, but I had to go to the loo. And it's like, dude, everyone has to go to the loo. You've got to factor this into your race. Like, don't use that as an excuse. The time is just the time. Don't worry about it. No one cares, right? No one cares.
But I would ask you, other than your super local races at the top end, right? When people, to your point about the golf thing, last time you were on the podium, what were the names of the people above and below you?
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea. You can also only race who's on the day, right? Sometimes you'll win because people turned up or didn't. Like that's it. It's just
nobody cares, right? To the point of like literally they were the cat you were competing with that day in the Hurt Locker to beat, and you're like, I have no idea who that was, and there's zero chance they remember who you were.
I always think on the Ironman race as well, right? I think a lot of the races you have to finish in 17 hours. Some are 16, depending on the ease of the race, right? But I have as much respect for the person that crosses the line after 17 hours who've maybe walked the whole thing in the Hurt Locker versus the pros that do it in 7 or 8, right? They're around the course and they're gone. And I know for me, that's an impossible feat. The times they do is just beyond me. But this other person's been on the course for 11 hours longer than you, and they're still going. And I have as much respect to clap that last person over the line at that amount. I don't care what time I've done it in, long or short, doesn't matter.
The mental toughness of those people.
Keep going for that amount of time.
Multiple lap courses, so you're just getting lapped all the time, and they just keep jamming on the whole way. So that mental fortitude is really key. I think the other thing, Nick, is like, when you're passionate about, the difference between passion and dedication, and figure out how dedicated you are to a goal and how passionate you're about it. Everyone wants to do well. They're always passionate about having a great, whatever time. But, alarm clock goes off at 4:30. You got to be at the pool at 5. It's, minus 10 C, and cold and whatever. Like, are you going? Like, now you're dedicated.
I don't miss those days. I don't
Yeah.
miss those days. I'll be honest with you. I'm not doing those anymore. So look, one question.
I don't have those days.
This
Where
will
do
be
you come
speaking more to Harry's heart than mine. Sorry, Harry. Last thing I wanted to mention here is, are there anything else you optimize outside of? I mean, it's all part of it, right? So I know two other areas for my life I don't optimize very well. One is hydration because I don't get thirsty, so I have to kind of set alarms for it. And the other one is sleep. I suffer from insomnia. I don't get as much sleep as the ordinary person.
Yeah.
But there's also other things that I will always take and recommend. So, for example, for me, creatine, I think, is one of those things. It's pretty safe. I definitely recommend it, no matter what you're really doing. You know, there's are there any things like that? The one thing you'd always recommend nutritionally, or any other kind of hacks or things you go, you know what, I have to get 8 hours, or I don't know, hydration, things like that.
I definitely sleep more. So I think one of the hacks I did not realize was so great for me before is I was a 5 or 6 hour sleeper, and that was fine. That's when I would wake up. I
That's
definitely
me.
need more like 7 hours now. I wake up more. I'm definitely a recovery matters thing. I'm a 5 mil of creatine thing. I think the thing we kind of touched on a little earlier was if you travel and do other things. And so like the two things I would say is you've got to be adaptive, and adaptive in two ways. One, when I travel, I make, or coach makes, she makes. It's tough to live with your coach because you can't hide. But the calendar will make that down week when I travel. So when I come to the UK, that's usually a run, swim only. I'm not bringing a bike, and so I might have a huge bike week before that. So you're adaptive. The other thing that's a little unique with my schedule is I don't have any downtime scheduled. So in theory, the periodization plan is, 3 or 4 weeks on, 1 week down. I have none. And that's because it's going to happen. With Crohn's, I mean, I haven't made it to 4 or 5 weeks
Interesting.
without. And so I just eat that week when it happens and be accepting of it. And that is probably really tough. And the thing with Crohn's is sometimes you can go back and be like, yeah, that was on me. Like I tried something I should never eaten out. And I'm like, the server looked at me and said there's no dairy, but he didn't look at me with certainty. But I'm like, I really want to have that. Or I trust them. And then there's times where it just happens, and you just got to kind of accept it and move on and know that, like, adapt your training plan to be like, this week didn't happen the way it was going to go. And now I'm going to adapt, and still try to hit my short-term milestones.
Yeah, it's like I say, have a framework, but have flexibility within the framework, because it's all about being adaptable. Where are you coming in from, Sean? Is what I was asking, because you keep saying about the weather being cold and everything.
I'm in Massachusetts, but we're in Western Massachusetts. We're like 3 hours from Boston, so Eastern United States. So, but up in the Berkshire Mountains, Berkshire Hills.
And then sticking on the topic of recovery, I know I still, by the way, Nick, haven't started down the creatine route, although I will be looking into that a bit more deeply. And also peptides. I don't know if you've looked into peptides, Sean, for Crohn's. I'm not sure if it helps or not. But what are the, if any, recovery devices you might use? Because I know, for example, the last few days I've been going strong with my infrared light devices, which has helped with my pain, as well as my Theragun, and sometimes the ball when I can get into it. Or
we love a gadget on this show, Sean. We love a gadget.
I know. I was listening to your episode.
Anything like that you use?
I was listening to the show a couple shows ago where Nick was going through. He was getting infrared, getting all the stuff, and he had like all the things. And I kept coming to the show.
By the way, the tennis elbow is honestly recovering much quicker than the doctor suggested, so it's working.
The thing that came to mind, because I knew it was going to come on here and it might come up, was the Rocky Ivan Drago thing.
Yeah.
So I don't use a ton. So I definitely I'm adamant about, I call it the window. So what I eat 2 hours before, I'm adamant more general now. The 2 hours before I train, almost like a race, what I have during training, and the half hour after. So that's when I usually have protein, my 5 milligrams, unless the second session of the day stuff. Like I'm very adamant about that piece of recovery, Harry. I use the stick. I did inherit one of the Theragun things. That thing's kind of evil, actually. So my cat, knowing, like, I think one of the other things is I know my calves, like for me, however I run or ride, like I've tried different stuff. That's something breaks first, right? And I know it's going to be my calves. So that's if I have limited time where I start, then it's quads, and it might be something else. But I always roll almost every day. And I think the big thing is I roll every day, whether it's sore or not. So I think it's like that routine of like, I'm going to get done running or riding, come back, take my protein, and then whether it's at night or, whatever, I'm going to roll. or use the Theragun now, which that thing's kind of evil. I haven't got to setting 2 yet. Setting
Oh,
1 is kind of
it
painful,
is
and
tough,
there's
especially on the
3. I don't
calves,
even know
especially
if
on
I'm
the
dealing
calves.
with 1 to
Oh,
3.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if
I've
I'm
been a
number
big
3,
fan
but
the
I don't
last few
think it's
days.
gonna happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, I'm a
do you
big
use
fan.
any biometric kind of apps? Any things that kind of measure your vitals, your HRV, your oxygen, your heart rate?
I'm on Gar. So I'm a big. I use Gar. I mean the toys. Like Wahoo Element on the bike. I use a Wahoo chest strap, Garmin watch, which I use Training Peaks, which does a pretty good job of looking at
Yeah,
things over time. I do use PE a lot, probably with Crohn's. So I've just started doing that a little more the past 3 or 4 months. That's where I can start to look, and because my power, we'll work through stuff is kind of the thing. Like the workout says this many watts, and so I'll work at that many watts. But a leading indicator for me that I'm either could be overtraining or it's Crohn's is like, was the PE to put out that number of watts, a 4 or was it a 7?
yeah.
And that becomes a leading indicator. And there's nothing that really measures that. Training stress score does, HRV, which like everything's trying to do that. But I think PE is still an applicable number for you to put in there. The biggest thing I would say is like all your numbers, like be honest. Especially PE is, I think, a great indicator. But to your point, Nick, you're N size of 1. Like I don't need, be like, I don't need to put in a PE at 2 so that people see that I look like I'm, a stud out there pushing these watts when it was a 7, because that's going to come back but that's not going to help me with my end game, or it's not going to catch me early to dial training back if I'm getting overtrained.
So any of
Sorry, what's
your the metrics? I mean, Harry's spoken about this a few times, where sometimes
what's
you'll
the
get an
PE, Nick?
HRV
Go
rating
on.
change.
What's a PE? Because I'm
Oh,
not.
sorry, perceived exertion.
Perceived
Okay.
So, like,
exertion. And
Yeah,
basically, how do I feel?
yeah,
Because if I'm having to work hard, it feels so much harder. Training Peaks, I mean, the heart rate might even still be similar, especially if you're doing harder sets, because you just the range is tighter,
yeah,
right? And so you're fine, you look fine in the numbers, but that thing felt tremendously hard.
yeah,
To me, that's and I asked that of my athletes, like, how did that feel? And
yeah,
don't tell me it was fine. Like that, the answer fine never, that's
yeah.
fine when it's actually fine. But
I,
we all know, especially as you age,
I do
the
most of
body.
my training with PE. I've never trained to heart rate. I have trained to power on the bike, but otherwise, nearly everything I've done has been PE. To be
Right.
honest,
To be
and
It's
fair,
so important.
I
for
had a
those this,
persistent version of about 9 this morning getting up out of bed. So that's my PE this morning.
which
There we go.
Sean mentioned LT earlier. For those listening, that's lactate threshold as well. So if you want to get the acronym earlier, but does your
Right.
any of your devices like your Garmin, do they tell you when you might have Crohn's coming on before you know? So for example, me and Harry talk a lot. We get HRV's gone up, we feel fine, and then 24 hours later we're sick. Some of the signs were there.
Yeah, no, HRV, I think it's as similar to I look at it as overtraining. It reads pretty similar to overtraining, right? Like
Okay,
something's starting to fail. So there is things called Crohn's fatigue. There's one called arthralgia, which is like arthritis feeling. But you don't have you have the arthritis feeling in the pain, but you still are operational. It's not bad. It's not as bad for you, just kind
yeah,
of miserable. So there are some leading indicators. And I think just leading through those, because I think when you're racing, you teach yourself, or really hardcore sessions, it's all about ignore and override, right? Adapt on the fly, but, might adapt some nutrition, but like every decision is, you know, can I
so
deal with
what do you
this?
tell
Rate.
yourself? What's going on up there when you're in the hurt locker? What do you do? What's your mantra? How do you push through the hurt locker? Either racing, Crohn's, whatever it might be, when you're in that space.
Yeah. For me, I try to be, a little old school. Can I be a cyborg? So every decision is, is this really a functional problem? Cramp. Do I have something that's physically breaking, or is this just hurt? Like, and that's what you train for. Like, to be comfortable being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? You learn that. And I think that's the part that I've had to adapt for, because, I can ignore and override a lot of stuff. But if I dial today back because I was feeling bad the last couple of days, I might be back in 1 or 2 days, right? I just get extra rest. If I do it again today, will that create 3 or 4 day gap? And so the betterment of the long-term
Mm.
goal, um, is it the right decision to ignore and override all the time? And I think, people, my Gen X racers, I think there's a lot of good that comes from it. You still see a lot of us being super competitive in the overall, not just in our age group.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
think that comes from, we go ignore and override the weather. We just don't care, right? Like somehow we got that. But I think we're also like at a point where that can be the end, of you physically.
Mm.
Mm. Harry.
I mean, it's tough. I think the biggest thing is like to be happy, and have a check-in. To your point, Nick, I think the biggest thing is, my wife does not really race. She's, quote unquote coach and whatever around here. But if I'm starting to go bad, I'm 56 and still get grounded. And I think you need that, you need that support group that keeps you in line. To be honest, she's one of the reasons I'm still right. Like the amount of food difference when you said how much is adapt, she should probably put out a book, a cookbook.
They're the things people don't see, though, right? I mean, Harry can
Yeah.
say that, I'm fit or I can celebrate achievements, but they all happen because I've got a partner who's allowed and enabled. Enabled's a better word than allowed, but it's enabled. We work, together to get. It's a joint win. It's never you never do it as an island, right? She's my
When you
sports
guys,
massage therapist. She's my therapist anyway, right? My best friend, my support, the one that's cheering me on, the motivation. A lot of the time when you're at these races in the Hurt Locker, and you know that in 3 miles I'm going to see my wife from the corner. Got to look strong when I get there. All those little things that keep you going. So yeah, and it doesn't go
Well, to
underestimated
your
for sure.
point, she doesn't like. I'll finish if I'm racing and she's not there. And, I'll finish. Text or someone will text just that I'm done.
Yeah.
Couldn't give a shit. Like if I medaled, other than last year, she wants to go to Spain. So other than that, she was like, "Did you finish well enough to go to Spain?" But after that, didn't care, right? And so I think that grounding of like, "Are you okay? Are you happy?" That's all
Yeah,
you need. And
that's
yeah,
nice.
the amount of food, the food in particular here, like she's taking one for the team. Cause I know when I'm gone and she has friends over, she's making lasagna, she's making food with cheese. I've got I married an Italian who doesn't get to use real cheese a lot, which, she's taking one for the team.
so that's actually an interesting point because both of you obviously married, and so when you're coming in from that 2 hour training session, you've got presumably someone has cooked, so you're not having to then spend another hour on your feet cooking when you get in to refuel your body, or they kind of basically taking care of you in that respect.
It depends. Like I would say here, it depends. I mean, we had 3 kids solo. My wife, now she's a librarian, but she was a partner in a law firm before and growing that firm with another partner, so she wasn't as available. I think the deal was always, other than a couple of rides and maybe post race stuff like hard races, I have to be I got to be a husband and a father. For me, that was the number one goal. It was never racing. Like, so for me, it was always, am I going to be, you know, the best dad possible? And then I'll race around that. If that means, sleep was probably the one thing when I was younger, kids got to be, if you got to be up and everything's got to be going by 7, like I'm done by 7. I know like the rides on the weekends, she would be like, hey, you need to be available after 11 o'clock. She didn't care if I left at 10 to go train or
Mm.
4. Like, doesn't
There's an
matter, but
interesting,
like I'm on duty at 11.
there's an interesting thing in there, and not everyone will understand this, and I'm hoping Sean will. I'm not using it to curry favor, but sometimes to be the best dad or the best partner, you also need to be able to train. So it's like there is that balance, right? And people go, I can't believe I can't believe your wife lets you do this, that, and the other. There's kind of the comments you'll hear. And it's like, you know what? I'd be a worse father if I couldn't do those things because they're really important to me to do. It's about getting the balance of making sure you're still present enough to do the things you want to be, but also not being completely. It's a really weird thing to say. It's not that you don't want time with those people all of the time, but there are some things we just need to do for ourselves. And if you can get that balance right, that's the perfect world, right? Where you can tick your boxes, get your training in, do what we need to do to be ourselves, and then you can really. I feel like then I can really show up. Like if I've done a workout early before they've woken up on a Saturday morning, I can be. I feel like I'm way more present knowing I've got that out the way
Yeah.
than I am if I haven't been able to do that thing. But I think a lot of people struggle to understand that. I don't know if you've come across something similar. If this is just me thinking this way, but I feel like I'm better as a parent.
Way early. For me, not having it hanging over me, like I feel like I am accomplished. I'm a little tired. I think that's a big deal. And there's actually stories where between life and stuff and kids, my wife has just said, go run. Like, go
Yeah,
get your
mine has
shoes
as
on.
well. Just get out of the
Yeah,
house. Go on.
yeah, kind of weird thing. It's like she probably
Yeah,
could use more help right now, but like you just need to go run for an hour and run
I guess.
hard and come back. Basically, enjoy your time for half of it, and the other half get your shit together.
Yeah.
And then come back in here and think about it because that's where you kind of, and that's my happy place. That's my place where I think that's where you kind of reset. Like, okay, I know I was getting stressed, but like everything's really good. Like I don't know why I'm being such a dork. I mean, I'll get back home and kind of get back together.
Yeah,
And that's
nice.
where it is a lot. For me outside, that is my I think where I get the worst, stress and whatever is where you have to take, taper time's always hard, right? You're in that,
Horrible. Yeah.
yeah, it's horrible, right? Which is kind of weird because you're home more, you're training less. You'd think you'd be like great, but you're like, that's not my routine. My routine and where I think and where I do stuff is out and about.
Yeah, taper time for those not familiar is when you massively reduce your exercise pre-race or pre-event. So you're fully fired up, you're the fittest you've ever been, and then you got to stop, and it's like it's like it's tough. Yeah,
My wife, Nick, calls it because you're like a child who is a whiner. Is she calls it weaning because it's like
weaning.
you weaning someone off the pot, weaning them off something, how whiny and cranky they get. So she doesn't call it tapering. She says, "Are you weaning?" Which
Yeah, I like
also
that.
makes me a wiener at times, which is also uncool. But that's why. But she uses the term weaning, which
Nice.
is
I might
probably
adopt
more
that.
apt.
I'll share
Yeah.
it.
The biggest thing I say is just get out there, like, and just be adaptable. To your point, your hair is like you're better, starting every workout. I think being consistent king and being adaptable. So even if you're going couch to 5K, I'm going to go out 5 days a week.
Yeah.
If you make it 20 feet, like that's 20 feet further. You put on your run shoes, you came back,
Yeah.
like it just builds that pattern, and then it's 40 feet, then it's 50 feet,
Yeah.
but you did it, and honestly, if anyone gives you any crap about that, screw them. Like
Yeah.
you do you.
Yeah, some training is better than no training, right? And it doesn't matter what that form takes. And that's what I'm reminding myself of at the moment. And I've got this WhatsApp group that we do monthly challenges in, and normally each month it follows one of the core components of my energy model, so the B, E, A, and T. So we're back to B, which is all about brain. And so this month it's all about reframing. So like, you might say to yourself, whatever it is, oh, I've got to get up this early and get to work, to, I'm grateful that I have a job that I can go and work at, right? For me, my thing yesterday, I think, was around my back. Obviously, instead of thinking to myself, look, I'm in so much pain, I can't do anything, I'm thinking, actually, at least I can walk, right? At the moment, right? That's been a massive blessing, that I'm actually able to walk and do stuff, right? If I was completely laid out, that would be another thing altogether. So I think for me, reframing is a real big skill to cultivate and develop. And you were talking about gratitude earlier. For me, it's all about gratitude. It shows, improves your health, improves your your ability to sleep, right?
Yeah.
All of these things, right? And stress is the big component that.
Yeah, bro. Somebody, as I always say, somebody would trade places with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
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 don't get
nice.
too upset. There's somebody who would be so fired up, So don't throw a little shine on yourself, because everyone always gets real upset, right? And is like tossing shade on themselves about how bad I have it or I'm not doing well. But same thing. Like to your point, Nick, going out to the end of an Ironman, like just when you think you had it bad, first nobody cares, and secondly, you're like, okay, I had an okay day. Like I gotta shut up, like and be grateful.
I always talk about it in the terms of a glass elevator. It's not mine. It's Michael Neal's, the coach Michael Neal. But he always says, what level are you viewing the world from? Can you raise the level? If you're viewing from level 1, which is all poor me, whatever, raise the level and look at it from a side, and then go higher again. How high can you get that elevator? How broad can you look at the world? And then it looks different. It's we've done a lot of podcasts over the years, Harry, around how you view things and how things look different to different people. And if we can change your perspective, you can change how you feel and change how the whole thing changes. So listen, what a great episode to have a guest on. First one ever. We've had a guest on Mindful Pass. Sean, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been great, man. It's been good to speak to a fellow triathlete, fellow athlete, generally someone who, a listener as well on the show. It's been great to have you. So thanks for joining us today on the episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and it's great listening to you guys. You guys cover so much great stuff, so I really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and being our first, as it were. And it's been really interesting, to hear both you and Nick over the years talking about events. And I think maybe I'll have to get back into thinking a different way of training myself, because I do miss I do miss that element as well of having an event to do. So that might be.
I think that's what this show's about, right? If we can have guests, whether it's you and me, Harry, or someone like Sean, it can make us think differently, or make us say, you know what, maybe there is one thing in our life we can just do a little bit more of, or optimize, take that action as you were talking about, Sean. Hey, this podcast is doing what we set out to do, right? Just make people reflect on their own lives and think about what they're doing. Can they optimize somewhere? Can they be more mindful? Can they optimize their wellness? Can we make a little hack shift, buy a new gadget, change the way we sleep, do something we eat, drink, whatever? If that helps optimize your life so you can live longer and be happier, then hey, we're winning, I think. So it's been good.
That's what it's about. Yep.
There we are.
Except for buying a gadget. I'll leave that to you guys.
Yeah, we do like the gadgets. Well, if you enjoyed the episode, please do follow us on Instagram. You can find us at mindful_pass_podcast. And yeah, we're going to, by the time this one comes out, the last episode we recorded will also be out. So I'm looking forward to the feedback on the Brené Brown as well. We'll see where that goes. Not my best self. So yeah, clearly I've got to let that go now. But I've really enjoyed this one. So Sean, thanks ever so much for joining me. Harry, good to see you, mate. I hope your back gets better very, very soon.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Sean. Nice to hear your story. Thank you for joining us.